The U.S. Food and Drug Administration today issued its toughest crackdown yet on the makers of electronic cigarettes. These vaping devices have become increasingly popular with young people. And as William Brangham reports, the FDA told manufacturers they have 2 months to prove they can keep their e-cigarettes out of the hands of minors.
In announcing its action today, the FDA said the use of e-cigarettes among young people had hit, quote, an epidemic proportion. It's illegal for anyone under 18 to buy any tobacco or nicotine product, including these e-cigarettes. In a moment, I'll talk with the head of the FDA, Dr. Scott Gottlieb. But first, to give you a sense of what these e-cigarettes are and how kids are using them, here's an excerpt from a report Special Correspondent Kavitha Cardoza of Education Week did 2 months ago at a high school in Connecticut.
A lot of jewels that remain in...
Fran Thompson, the principal of Jonathan Law High School, opens what he calls his vaping drawer.
These are some of the items that we confiscated this week.
The items are all e-cigarettes. The most popular brand by far is called Juul.
This is a Juul. I know it looks like a flash drive, right? So the liquid goes in here.
Basically, they're devices that heat up a liquid, often nicotine, and you inhale the vapor.
And then they smoke it, they vape it.
Kids can hide them anywhere.
Their socks, their backpacks, their pockets, their wallets, their bras, back pockets, everywhere.
Anywhere.
Juuling, as it's called, has spiked all over the country among youth. But unlike alcohol or cigarettes, often parents aren't even sure what it is. Parent Liz Goodwin has 2 teenagers in the school. She found nicotine liquid pods in their pockets while she was doing laundry.
When I found the pods, I Googled it and looked for it, and I couldn't find anything. I just had a photo of it and tried to describe it and what is this? And then I saw the amount of nicotine. It's the equivalent of 1 pack of cigarettes. I also understood some of my adult friends used e-cigarettes as a way of getting off of smoking. So I didn't know how dangerous it was.
I'll show you what was going on.
Principal Thompson says his aha moment was in the bathroom.
So your typical high school bathroom, right?
Brings back memories.
Just like watching Grease, right? But what was happening was you might have 5 or 6 kids hanging out in here with the door closed and vaping.
Suchitra Krishnan Saran runs the Yale Tobacco Centers of Regulatory Science at Yale University. She says the flavors are a big part of e-cigarettes' popularity. They sound playful and harmless. Mango, mint, cotton candy, blueberry pie.
These products come in over 7,000 different flavors, and they can also mix and match to create their own, which again introduces a sense of novelty.
But the vapors inhaled have been found to contain lead, zinc, chromium, and nickel. And Krishnan Saran says nicotine, the main liquid in these devices, is extremely addictive and can cause memory and attention loss, especially in the developing teenage brain.
That was from a report by Special Correspondent Kavitha Cardoza. In its warning today, the FDA told the 4 main manufacturers of e-cigarettes that if they can't prove within 60 days that they can keep these devices out of the hands of kids, the FDA would consider taking them off the market totally. The FDA also sent over 1,000 warning letters to retailers that sell them, places like drugstores and gas stations. For more on today's action by the Food and Drug Administration, I'm joined by the head of that agency, FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb. Commissioner, thank you very much for being here. Could you just explain to me, this clearly seems like an escalation on the FDA's part today. Why today? Why now?
Well, what we have access to right now is data that demonstrates to us that there's nothing short of an epidemic of use among teenagers. We knew use was rising among high school teenagers, among young people, kids, but we now have access to some preliminary data that we'll make public pretty soon that shows that this is nothing short of an epidemic of use. And we feel we need to step in with dramatic action to try to curtail that use. You know, unfortunately, we do see these e-cigarettes as a viable alternative for adult smokers to migrate off of combustible tobacco onto products that might not have all the risks associated with them of smoking. But unfortunately, in order to close the on-ramp for kids, we're now going to have to take some actions that we think are going to narrow the off-ramp for adults. And that's a trade-off that we have to make based on what we're seeing in the market right now.
So you mentioned this, an epidemic level of use among kids. As a physician and as the head of the FDA, can you just sketch out for me, what do you see as the main health problems with kids using these products?
Well, there's multiple problems. First of all, we know that nicotine has direct effects on the developing brain. So nicotine in a child is not harmless. It's not a benign substance. But also, if we see the trend in use that we're seeing right now, that's creating a massive pool of young people who are becoming habituated on and addicted to nicotine. And some component of those young people are going to migrate onto combustible tobacco products. So if you believe, as we do, that no child should be using any tobacco product, and we certainly don't want to see a new generation of young people and kids become addicted to nicotine and start smoking, this pool of users of e-cigarettes, and it's a pool that's growing very sharply based on the data that we have, represents risk for the future that some component of these kids are going to migrate onto cigarettes and ultimately become long-term smokers, with all the health effects that come from that.
So you have told the manufacturers, you guys have 60 days to prove to us that you can keep these out of kids' hands. Let's say the manufacturers fail to meet that test. What happens then?
Well, what we said today is we're actively looking at removing from the market the flavored products. We believe that one of the aspects of these products that makes them appealing to kids are the flavors, and some of those flavors come in fruity flavors and other kinds of flavors that we think are increasing the appeal of these products to kids. And so right now those products remain on the market because the agency allows them to remain on the market under what we call an exercise of enforcement discretion. We haven't required the manufacturers to file applications to prove that those flavors actually have a net public health benefit, but we have the ability to do that. We have the legal authority to do that. So what we would do is tell the manufacturers that the flavors need to come off the market, and if they want to reintroduce the flavored products onto the market, they'll have to file successful applications with the FDA that demonstrate that the existence of flavors provide a net public health benefit, that the benefits of flavors in terms of helping adult smokers quit combustible tobacco outweigh the risk that it's going to also appeal to young people and get a kid hooked on an e-cigarette.
So the FDA wouldn't be necessarily taking these products completely. You'd be taking specifically the ones that have fruity flavors, candy flavors, dessert flavors that, it seems to me you're arguing, those appeal particularly to kids.
Well, the bottom line is all options are on the table, and if the trends in use that we're seeing right now continue, we're going to have to take even more dramatic actions. We think right now we can step into this market with a combination of enforcement actions against the places that we know kids are getting access to these products, which includes retail establishments that are selling them without putting proper restrictions in place or without carding minors, as well as the online sites where we think that there are straw purchases being made where someone's going online, buying a lot of these products and then reselling them to kids. But the other action we would take immediately is look at removing these flavored products from the market. If we don't think that those actions are sufficient to try to curtail the scope of use that we're now seeing among kids, we're willing to step into the market and take even more dramatic action. Now, I will say, we do think the e-cigarettes offer a viable alternative for adult smokers. So we don't want to extinguish this opportunity entirely, because we do see some potential benefit from having these products on the market as a way for adult smokers to get access to nicotine without all the harmful effects of combusting tobacco. But it's going to have to come, I think, going forward with some additional limitations on the availability and the types of products being marketed in order to stem what we're seeing as an epidemic of use among kids.
Juul Labs, which is one of the main manufacturers of these e-cigarettes, several months ago they said we're going to put $30 million into a campaign to keep these cigarettes out of kids' hands. They said that they supported the idea of raising the national age to 21 for these products. They put out a conciliatory statement supporting what you did today. But clearly you don't think the manufacturers have done enough thus far.
Well, look, I'm measuring what the manufacturers are doing, and frankly what we're doing, based on the results, based on the data that we're seeing. And the data that we're seeing is showing that the proportion of teenagers and high school students using these products is growing at a very fast clip. Ultimately, that's going to be the measure that I judge the manufacturers and I judge our own success by. That's what I'm looking at.
All right, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, Commissioner of the FDA, thanks very much.
Thank you.